The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, soft and steady like the sky couldn't decide whether to cry or just breathe. By the time Lila Hart crossed the battered sign that read Welcome to Seabrook Cove, the paint chipped, the lettering familiar in a way that made her throat tighten. Her hands were locked around the steering wheel like it could keep her from turning around. Stay with me for the next 1 hour because what happened to Lila will leave you breathless. Before we dive deep into this incredible journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification so you never miss stories like this. She hadn't meant to come back like this. Not with her life reduced to what fit in the back of a rented SUV. Not with her resume sitting in her inbox like a thing she couldn't touch without flinching. Not with the sting of her last apartment's keys on the ring, because she hadn't been able to bring herself to take them off yet. The windshield wipers slid back and forth, and the gray ocean appeared through the trees in quick glimpses, slate water, white foam, the old pier like a dark line reaching out into the mist. Seabrook Cove looked the same the way childhood photos did. Smaller than you remembered but somehow sharper. More honest. She passed the diner that used to smell like frying onions at 6 in the morning. The gas station that always had wind chimes hanging in front, clinking like nervous laughter. The corner where she and her cousin had once raced bikes and skinned their knees and swore they'd never leave. She swallowed. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. She didn't pick it up. She already knew what it was. Another just checking in from someone who didn't know what to say anymore. Another link to a job posting. Another polite message from an old coworker that carried the soft distance of people who'd watched her fall and hadn't been sure whether to reach down. Lila turned onto Bayview Road, the road that curved toward the water and the lighthouse. Toward her aunt's cottage. Toward the place she hadn't stepped foot in since May Hart's funeral. The cottage appeared through the rain like it was trying not to startle her. Gray shingles, white trim, 2 lilac bushes that still leaned toward the porch rail like they were gossiping. A single porch light glowed warm against the wet afternoon. Her chest tightened so fast she had to pull over for a second and just breathe. "Okay," she whispered, though no one was in the car with her. "Okay, I'm here." She parked crooked in the gravel drive, killed the engine, and listened to the sudden quiet. The rain. The soft hiss of ocean wind in the trees. Somewhere, a gull complained like it had a personal grudge. She stepped out, the cold wet air hitting her cheeks. Her shoes sank into damp gravel. She stood there with the door open, looking at the cottage like it might reject her. Then her body moved before her thoughts could stop it. She grabbed her bag, pulled her hood up, and hurried to the porch, where the wood creaked in the exact same places it always had. The front door was painted the same pale blue her aunt used to call morning. The key was under the planter, exactly where it used to be. May never trusted hiding places much, but she trusted routine. She would have trusted Lila to remember. Her fingers shook as she slid the key in. The lock caught, then turned. The door opened. Warm air, faintly lavender and lemon and something like old books, breathed out at her. Lila stood in the doorway, frozen, and for a moment she wasn't 29 and exhausted and trying to rebuild. She was 16 again, stepping into her aunt's kitchen after school, knowing there'd be tea waiting and quiet questions that didn't demand too much. The silence inside wasn't empty. It was full of May. Lila set her bag down slowly as if sudden movement might break the memory. The cottage looked cared for. Dust-free. The throw blanket folded neatly on the couch. The mug on the counter like someone had been mid-thought and set it down. A small vase with dried wildflowers, May's habit, sat by the window. Someone had been here. Not in a creepy way. In a kindly way. Lila's throat burned. She moved deeper inside, turning on lights, her footsteps careful. She touched the back of the couch, the edge of the counter, the worn armchair by the fireplace. Everything was familiar enough to hurt. On the kitchen table sat a thick envelope, cream-colored, with her name printed neatly on the front. Her stomach dropped. She knew what it was before she touched it. The part of grief that didn't care whether you were ready. She sat down in May's chair and stared at the envelope until her eyes blurred. Then she opened it. Inside were documents with crisp headings. Last will and testament. Trust addendum. Property transfer. Asterisk asterisk. Her fingers skimmed words that felt too heavy to hold. May Hart had left Lila the cottage. But not only the cottage. A half-ownership stake in something called the Harbor Heritage Trust, which included the old lighthouse inn at the edge of town, the one that had been shuttered for years. The place May used to point to and say, "That building's got stories. Somebody ought to listen." Lila had assumed the inn would be sold or abandoned, or eventually claimed by the ocean. But May hadn't let it go that way. The pages continued and Lila's breath shortened as she read. There was a clause. A clause with May's handwriting copied into a typed note at the bottom, as if May had insisted on her voice being there too. To keep the Harbor Heritage Trust in Seabrook hands and out of developer hands, the trustees must be a married couple, residing in Seabrook Cove, committed to the community. If the trust is without qualified trustees within 30 days of my passing, the assets revert to the town for auction. Lila stared. Married couple? She whispered aloud, like saying it might make it less real. She flipped the page like she could find an explanation underneath. Instead she found a name. Lila blinked. She read it again. Ethan Cole. Her brain rifled through old town memories. Fishermen, shop owners, kids she'd shared lockers with, the mechanic's son, the mayor's daughter. No Ethan Cole. Under his name was an address. Not a city address. An address in Seabrook Cove. And a signature on a purchase agreement, dated months before May's death, stating that Ethan Cole had bought the other half share of the trust from a distant relative May had never stopped complaining about. Lila sat back, stunned. Who buys half of a dusty old trust in a town like this? Who is Ethan Cole? And why had May done this, set it up like a puzzle with a timer? She looked around the quiet kitchen like May might walk in with flour on her hands and say, "Don't make that face, sweetheart. I had my reasons. Lila pressed her fingertips to her forehead. 30 days. Married couple trustees. Auction if not. And the only other trustee already assigned was a stranger. Her phone buzzed again. This time she picked it up without looking. A message from an unknown local number. Hi Lila, this is Marisol Alvarez at Town Hall. Welcome back. Please call me when you can about your Aunt May's trust paperwork. Lila stared at the screen. Town Hall already knew. Of course they did. In a town like this, paperwork didn't sit quietly. It walked around and told people what it heard. Lila's shoulders sagged. She set the phone down and stood up on legs that felt a little too soft. She walked to the window and looked out at the rain, at the lilacs leaning under water weight. She hadn't come back for a story. She'd come back for a place to breathe. And the town had handed her a legal deadline like a dare. Outside, a car door slammed. Lila turned, startled. Through the window she saw a dark pickup parked at the edge of the drive, just beyond her SUV. A tall figure stepped out, pulling his jacket collar up against the rain, moving with the calm efficiency of someone who didn't waste motion. He walked up the porch steps like he'd done it before. He knocked once. Not loud. Not shy. Just certain. Lila's heart started doing something inconvenient. She crossed the room, opened the door, and came face to face with a man she'd never met. He was soaked at the shoulders, rainwater dripping off his hair. Dark hair cut simple. Stubble that looked like he'd forgotten to shave, not like he was trying to look rugged. His eyes were the color of wet wood, brown, steady, unreadable in the way quiet men sometimes were. He held a small cardboard box in both hands like it mattered. "Lila Hart?" he asked. His voice was low, simple. No warmth forced into it. No charm. Just real. "Yes," she said, cautious. He nodded once. "I'm Ethan." Something in her stomach dropped again, slow this time. He held the box out. "These were at the post office. Addressed to your aunt. They asked me to bring them over." "You live here?" Lila heard herself ask. He glanced past her shoulder into the cottage as if checking she was actually inside and okay. "Down the road." He paused, then added, "I helped May with a few things. After her hips started bothering her." Lila blinked. She never said. She didn't like people worrying, he said, and the way he said it, like it was fact, like he'd known May well enough to respect her stubbornness, made Lila's throat tighten. She took the box from him, careful not to touch his hands, though she felt strangely aware of how close they were. "Thank you," she said. Ethan nodded again, rain sliding off his lashes. "You're settled?" "No," she admitted before she could stop herself. "But I'm here." He looked at her a beat longer than necessary, his gaze steady but not invasive, like he was taking inventory of what she wasn't saying. Then he said, "Your porch step's loose. I can fix it." Lila's first instinct was to say no. She had a long history of refusing help until her arms shook. But her second instinct, the one that felt tired of fighting everything, made her pause. "It's been loose for years," she said instead. "Still needs fixing," he replied. And for some reason, the simple steadiness of that line made her eyes sting. Ethan shifted his weight. "Town Hall will call you if they haven't already." Lila's stomach turned. "They already did." His jaw tightened slightly like he'd expected that. "Marisol." "Yeah." A silence settled between them, filled with the rain and the ocean and all the things neither of them wanted to say right away. Ethan cleared his throat. I should let you unpack. If you need anything, you can knock. He started to step back. Lila surprised herself. Wait. He paused, looking at her. She held up the envelope she'd opened, the papers peeking out. I read it. His eyes flicked to the documents, then back to her face. He didn't look shocked. He looked resigned. Like he'd been waiting for this moment. Okay, he said quietly. Are you? Lila's voice caught. Are you that Ethan Cole? His brows drew together slightly. I'm Ethan Cole. That's not what I mean. She swallowed. Why are you on my aunt's trust? Ethan's gaze drifted past her again, toward the kitchen table, the soft lamp light, the life May had made. His voice stayed calm, but something under it tightened. May asked me, he said. Why? He looked down for half a second, then back up, steady again. Because she didn't trust anyone else to keep it here. Lila stared at him, rain-soaked stranger on her porch, and felt the world tilt. Do you even know what the clause says? She asked. His mouth pressed into a line. I do. And you're okay with it? Lila's laugh came out sharp, not amused. A married couple. Trustees. 30 days. Auction if not. It's insane. It's old, Ethan corrected gently. And it's effective. Lila's hands tightened around the papers. So what were you planning to do? Wait for me to show up and then, what? Propose? Ethan didn't flinch. He just looked at her quiet. No, he said. I wasn't planning to do anything until you were ready to talk. Lila's breath hitched at the word ready, because she hadn't felt ready for anything in a long time. She tried to ground herself in irritation. This can't be the only way. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly, not at her, at the situation. It's the fastest way. The trust is written to require proof. Not intention. Proof. Lila stared at him. Proof like a marriage license. Yes. The rain sounded louder for a moment, like the world leaned in to listen. Lila's voice dropped. I can't just marry a stranger. Ethan's gaze softened almost imperceptibly, as if he understood the weight of that sentence in a way she hadn't said out loud. You wouldn't be marrying me, he said. Not like that. Lila frowned. What does that even mean? It means, Ethan said careful, we can do the paperwork. Keep the trust from being auctioned. Then undo it later if you want. Her chest tightened. If I want. If you want, he repeated, steady. Lila shook her head, overwhelmed. Why would you do this? Ethan's voice stayed low. Because May cared about that inn. Because I promised her I'd protect it. And because I'm already tied to it. Lila stared at him. Why are you tied to it? Who are you? Ethan's eyes held hers. A man who lives down the road. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Lila could feel it. He didn't elaborate. He didn't try to charm his way out. He just stood there in the rain, quietly taking whatever she threw at him. It made her anger falter. Made her confusion take its place. Ethan glanced at the loose porch step. I can fix that now if you want. Gives you something simple to watch while you think. Lila blinked at him. Something simple. She'd forgotten how much she needed simple. She swallowed hard. Fine, she said and added, because pride hated silence, but you're not coming in. I barely know you. Ethan nodded once, like that boundary made sense to him. Okay. He set his toolbox down, where had that come from? And crouched at the step, pulling a small drill from his jacket pocket like he'd been carrying it for no reason except readiness. Lila stood in the doorway, clutching the box of mail and the trust papers, watching him work. He moved with quiet confidence. Tightened screws. Checked the wood. Didn't rush. Didn't act like fixing a porch step was beneath him. The rain darkened his shoulders. His hands were strong-looking, not in a dramatic way, just in the way of a person who did things instead of talking about them. Lila's chest ached in an unexpected place. When he stood, he tested the step with his boot. Held firm. There, he said simply. Lila nodded. Thanks. Ethan picked up his toolbox. He hesitated. Town hall opens at 8. Lila's stomach clenched again. Of course it does. Ethan looked at her, his voice quiet. Marisol will want to see you. To explain. She'll have options. Options that still involve me marrying you, Lila said flatly. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. Maybe. Or something close to it. Lila's hands tightened around the papers until her knuckles hurt. Ethan's voice softened by a fraction. You don't have to decide tonight. Lila laughed sharp again. The clock says I do. Ethan's jaw flexed like he didn't like that either. Then he said, get some sleep. Eat something. We'll talk in the morning. Oh. as if they already belonged in the same sentence. Lila wanted to hate that. Instead, it made something in her chest loosen, just a little. Ethan stepped off the porch. He paused at the bottom of the steps and looked back up at her. "If you need anything," he said again, "knock." Then he walked back to his truck, climbed in, and drove away into the rain like he hadn't just tilted her whole life sideways. Lila stood in the doorway long after he left, holding a box of mail and a stack of legal papers, feeling the cottage around her like a familiar hand on her back. She closed the door slowly. And for the first time since she'd arrived, she let herself sink onto the couch, press her palms to her eyes and breathe. Because the truth she didn't want to admit was simple and terrifying. She didn't know how to fix her life. But Ethan Cole looked like a man who fixed things. And that made her afraid. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean and cold. The ocean looked calmer, like it had spent the night thinking and decided not to argue anymore. Lila stood in front of the bathroom mirror in May's cottage, smoothing her hair back and trying to make her face look like someone who had it together. It didn't. Her eyes were puffy. Her mouth held tension like a habit. She wore jeans and a sweater, the kind of outfit that said, "I'm normal, I swear." She stared at herself a long moment. "You are not marrying a stranger," she told her reflection. Her reflection didn't look convinced. Town Hall in Seabrook Cove was a small white building with a flag out front and flower planters that someone had clearly cared for. Lila pushed open the door and immediately felt the warmth of the heater and the weight of everyone knowing her business. A bell chimed overhead. At the counter sat a woman with silver hair pulled into a neat bun, glasses on a chain, and a smile sharp enough to cut through fear. "Lila Hart," Marisol Alvarez said, like she'd been expecting her since childhood. "Welcome home, honey." Lila forced a polite smile. "Hi." Marisol's eyes softened. "I'm sorry about May." Lila's throat tightened. "Thank you." Marisol gestured to a small office with a round table. "Come sit. We'll talk." "I made coffee." Lila followed, feeling like she was walking into a meeting she hadn't prepared for. Inside the office, there were framed photos of town events. Lobster festivals, school plays, community cleanups, a Christmas tree lighting. There was May in one of them, laughing with her hands on her hips like she owned the world. Lila sat down and tried not to stare. Marisol slid a folder across the table. May was smart, stubborn, annoying in the best way. Lila's eyes stung. "Yes." Marisol tapped the folder. "She did this trust to protect the lighthouse Inn from being sold to outside developers. You remember the letters? The petitions?" "I remember her yelling about it at dinner," Lila said quietly. Marisol nodded. She was right. Folks had been trying to buy that property for years. Lila swallowed. So she tied it to marriage. Marisol sighed like she'd had this conversation in her head 100 times. "The clause is old. It comes from the original trust documents, back when the town was smaller-minded. Married trustees were considered stable. It's outdated, but it's written in iron." Lila's hands curled into her lap. "So it's either I marry Ethan Cole or the inn gets auctioned." Marisol held up a hand. "Not exactly. There's a legal path to restructure the trust." Hope flickered. Marisol continued, "But it takes time. Court filings, hearings, and we don't have time. The 30-day clock is real. The state doesn't care about feelings." Lila exhaled, hope dying. Marisol leaned forward, voice gentle. "Ethan didn't push this on you, did he?" Lila blinked. "No. He's weirdly calm." Marisol smiled. "That's Ethan." Lila frowned. "Who is he exactly? Everyone talks like I should know." Marisol's expression shifted, like she was deciding how much to say. "He's a local in the way that matters. Been here quietly for a few years. Bought the old boatyard and restored it. Keeps his head down. And he just bought half a trust for fun?" Marisol's smile tugged at one corner. "Honey, Ethan Cole is wealthy." Lila stared. "How wealthy?" Marisol paused. "Enough that he could have bought the whole town if he wanted." Lila's stomach dropped. "You're joking." Marisol didn't look like she was joking. Lila sat back, stunned. "So he's that Ethan Cole?" Marisol nodded. "Tech money. Sold a company. Moved here after some life stuff. Keeps it quiet." Lila's skin prickled, a hot-cold mix of embarrassment and alarm. She'd stood on her porch yesterday and argued with a billionaire like he was a guy who fixed fences. Which he was, apparently. Lila's voice came out thin. "So this is, what? A rich man's plan?" Marisol's gaze sharpened. "No. Don't do that." Lila blinked. Marisol's voice softened again. Ethan didn't need May's trust. He didn't need you. He didn't even need this town if we're being honest. But he chose to be here. He chose to help May. And he chose to keep that in from being eaten alive. Lila swallowed. Why? Marisol hesitated. That's his story to tell. Not mine. Lila stared at the folder. So what are my options? Marisol slid another paper forward. Option 1. You let the trust revert, the property gets auctioned, and you lose what May left you. Lila's chest tightened. Option 2, Marisol continued. You and Ethan file as trustees with proof of marriage. You keep control. You buy time. Lila's mouth went dry. Buy time for what? Marisol's eyes softened. For you to decide what you actually want. For you to grieve. For you to settle. For you to figure out if May's crazy plan was actually, maybe not crazy. Lila let out a humorless laugh. You're all insane. Marisol smiled gently. We're a small town. We survive on each other. Sometimes the paperwork reflects that. Lila rubbed her forehead. How long would I have to be married? Marisol flipped through the folder. 90 days minimum to satisfy the trustee residency requirements and prevent immediate challenge. After that, you can petition to restructure. Or keep it. Lila's heart pounded. 90 days. Married. To a quiet billionaire she barely knew. Marisol watched her carefully. You don't have to decide alone. Ethan is coming. Lila's head snapped up. He is. Marisol nodded. He asked me to call him when you arrived. I did. Lila's cheeks heated. Of course he did. Before she could spiral, a knock sounded at the office door. Then Ethan stepped in. He looked different today, dry, clean, hair still slightly messy but in a deliberate way. A dark sweater, jeans, boots that had clearly seen work. He didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a man who knew how to change a tire and didn't mind doing it. His gaze landed on Lila. He didn't smile, not really. But something in his eyes softened, like relief that she'd actually come. Morning, he said quietly. Lila swallowed. Hi. Marisol stood. I'll give you 2 a minute. She left, closing the door behind her. Silence settled in the small office, filled with framed photos and the smell of coffee. Ethan walked to the table but didn't sit right away. He looked at Lila like he was trying to read the shape of her fear without touching it. How are you? He asked. Lila let out a sharp laugh. Do you want the polite answer or the real one? The real one, Ethan said, simple. Lila stared at him, then looked away. I feel like my aunt planned my life from the grave. Ethan's mouth twitched faintly, almost a smile. Sounds like May. Lila's eyes flashed back to him. And you're rich. Ethan blinked once like he'd expected that too. Yes. That's it. Lila said, incredulous. Just, yes. Ethan sat down slowly across from her. It doesn't change the trust. It changes everything, Lila snapped, then immediately regretted it. Her voice softened, shaky. I don't even know you. Ethan's gaze held hers. You know I fixed your porch step. Lila blinked, caught off guard. Ethan continued, calm. You know I helped May. You know I'm not trying to force you. Lila's throat tightened. How do I know that? Ethan's jaw flexed. He looked down for a moment, like he was choosing words he didn't love. Then he said, You don't. Not yet. That honesty hit her harder than a speech would have. Lila looked at the papers again, the deadline like a weight on her lungs. If we do this, she said slowly, it's not real. Ethan's eyes didn't change, but something in his posture tightened, like he accepted the terms even if they cost him something. Okay, he said. Lila searched his face. You're just okay with that? Ethan nodded once. I'm okay with keeping May's trust safe. I'm okay with you having time. Lila's voice dropped. Why do you care if I have time? Ethan met her gaze. His voice stayed low, steady. Because you look like someone who's been running on empty for a long time. Lila's chest tightened like he'd touched something tender without permission. She looked away quickly, blinking. Ethan didn't push. He didn't lean in. He just sat there present. After a moment he said, If you say no, I won't fight you. I'll try to stop the auction another way. But I don't know if I can. Lila's hands trembled slightly under the table. She hated that she was cornered. She hated that the corner wasn't cruel, it was quiet and practical and wrapped in her aunt's stubborn love. She breathed in. Breathed out. Okay, she whispered. Ethan's eyes sharpened. Okay. Lila nodded once, tears stinging. We'll do the paperwork. 90 days. Then we figure it out. Ethan's gaze held hers, steady. Okay. And something in that simple agreement felt like a door clicking shut behind her. Marisol came back in, clapping her hands once like she could make the moment lighter. "Well," she said briskly, "if we're doing this, we're doing it right. I have the license paperwork ready. You'll sign. We'll file. The town will talk." Lila's stomach flipped. "People will know?" Marisol gave her an amused look. "Honey, people already know." Lila groaned softly, covering her face. Ethan's voice was quiet but not unkind. "They'll get used to it." Lila peeked at him through her fingers. "Easy for you to say." Ethan's mouth twitched again. "They talk about me anyway." Marisol slid the papers forward. "Names here. Dates here. And, you'll need witnesses." Lila looked up. "Witnesses?" Marisol grinned. "It's a small town. We do everything with witnesses." Within 10 minutes, Nora from the cafe next door and Theo from the hardware store were standing in the office, beaming like Christmas had come early. They signed with dramatic flourishes, whispering excitedly like they were watching a show. Lila wanted to melt into the floor. Ethan sat beside her, silent, steady. When the final line was ready, Marisol pointed. "Here. Both of you." Lila stared at the signature line until her vision blurred. This wasn't how people got married. No flowers. No love story. No joy. Just ink and pressure and a clock. She glanced sideways at Ethan. He was watching her, his expression calm but his eyes, careful. Like he would stop this if she asked. Like he was holding the door open, even while the town gently pushed her through it. Lila swallowed hard. Her hand shook as she signed. Ethan picked up the pen next. He didn't hesitate. He signed with steady strokes, then set the pen down quietly. Marisol stamped the document with a satisfying thud. "There," she said. "Congratulations. You're married." The room went still for half a second. Then Nora squealed, "Oh my gosh, Lila," and Theo said, "Didn't have this on my bingo card," and Marisol looked pleased like she'd just secured the town's future. Lila sat frozen, her pulse roaring. "Married. To Ethan Cole." Ethan glanced at her. His voice was low only for her. "You okay?" Lila laughed softly, shaky. "No." Ethan nodded as if that made sense. "Me neither." And somehow, that tiny confession made her feel less alone in the absurdity of it. Outside town hall, the sky had broken into pale winter sunlight. The air was sharp, salty, alive. Lila stood on the steps, holding the folder, feeling like she'd stepped into someone else's life. Ethan stood beside her, hands in his pockets, looking out at the street like he was bracing for the town's reaction. Nora waved from the cafe doorway, practically vibrating. Theo shouted congratulations and disappeared into the hardware store like he had news to spread. Lila looked at Ethan. "So what now?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "Now we make it simple." Lila blinked. "Simple?" Ethan nodded. "We keep the trust safe. We keep you from drowning in paperwork. We live our lives." Lila stared at him. "As what?" "Husband and wife." Ethan's gaze shifted to her, steady. "On paper." Lila's chest tightened again. Ethan added, quieter, "In public we'll need to look consistent." Lila's stomach flipped. "So we're pretending." Ethan's voice stayed calm. "We're protecting." "There's a difference." Lila didn't know if she believed that. But when Ethan held the door of his truck open for her to get in, because Marisol had insisted they at least leave together so the town sees, his hand hovered at the small of her back, not touching, just there like a quiet question. Lila froze. Ethan didn't push. He just waited. Lila took one breath, then stepped forward. His hand touched her lightly for 1 second, warm through her sweater, guiding her into the seat. It wasn't intimate. It wasn't romantic. It was careful. And it made her heart do something she didn't want to name. As the truck rolled down the street, Seabrook Cove watched them through windows and doorways and the soft curiosity of a place that didn't have much else to do on a winter morning. Lila stared out at the familiar storefronts, feeling exposed. Ethan's voice cut through her spiral, quiet. "Do you want breakfast?" Lila blinked at him. "What?" Ethan kept his eyes on the road. "You haven't eaten." Lila's throat tightened because he was right, and because he'd noticed without her saying it. "I don't know," she admitted. Ethan nodded. "Okay, we'll start with coffee." "Nora's." Lila let out a breath. "Nora is going to interrogate me." Ethan's mouth twitched. "Probably." Lila stared at his profile, the calm jaw, the steady hands on the wheel, and felt something strange. Not love. Not comfort. Just the smallest sense of being carried for a moment by someone else's steadiness. She hated how much she needed that. At Nora's cafe, the smell of cinnamon and coffee wrapped around them like a blanket. Nora squealed again when they walked in, and the few customers turned their heads like sunflowers, smiling and whispering. Lila wanted to disappear. Ethan leaned slightly toward her, his voice low. "You can hold my hand if it helps." Lila's eyes snapped to his. He didn't look amused. He looked practical, like he was offering a tool. Lila's chest tightened. "Does it help you?" Ethan paused, then said softly, "It keeps them from asking questions we don't want to answer." Lila stared at him a beat longer than necessary. Then, before she could overthink, she slid her hand into his. His hand was warm, steady, calloused in a way that surprised her more than the billionaire part. He didn't squeeze. He didn't pull her closer. He just held on. And Lila realized with a sudden sting that no one had held on to her like that in a long time. If you want to know how this accidental marriage turns into something neither of them planned, make sure you're subscribed. Days in Seabrook Cove didn't rush. They moved like tides, predictable, ordinary, quietly relentless. Lila fell into routines she hadn't known she missed. Morning coffee at Nora's, where the gossip came warm and sweet. A walk to the shoreline when her chest got tight. Unpacking May's cottage slowly, like opening drawers of memory and deciding what she could keep without breaking. And then there was Ethan. He didn't hover. He didn't insist on closeness. He showed up the way sunrise did. Consistent, not asking permission, not dramatic. He fixed the porch rail. He patched a leak under the sink without making a big deal of it. He brought her a bag of groceries when he noticed she kept forgetting to eat actual meals. "You didn't have to," Lila said the first time, defensive. Ethan set the bag on the counter. "You're busy." "With what?" Lila snapped. "I'm unemployed. I'm just existing." Ethan looked at her quietly. That takes energy too. It disarmed her so much she had to turn away. They practiced public consistency, the way Ethan called it. A hand at the small of her back when they walked into town meetings. A shared table at Nora's. Ethan picking up her forgotten scarf without a word and draping it around her shoulders like he'd done it 100 times. The town softened around them, not because they believed the romance but because they believed the steadiness. Seabrook Cove loved steadiness. It trusted what stayed. Lila didn't. Not yet. Some nights she lay in May's bed and stared at the ceiling, her chest tight with the fear of being seen. Of being known. Of being disappointed again. Because that was her wound, really. Not the breakup, though, that had cut deep enough. Not even the burnout, though, that had scraped her down to something raw. It was the shame of having tried so hard to build a life she believed in, and watching it fall apart in public. 2 years ago, Lila had been the bright one. The ambitious one. The girl who left Seabrook Cove with scholarship dreams and came back for holidays talking about impact and systems and making things better. She'd worked for a nonprofit in the city. She'd poured herself into it until her body didn't feel like hers. She'd dated a man who said he loved her drive, until it inconvenienced him. Until she needed support instead of applause. Then the nonprofit's funding scandal hit, and even though she hadn't caused it, her name was on enough emails that the internet decided she was guilty. The board accepted her resignation for optics. Her boyfriend told her she was too much and too intense, and maybe this is a sign you should slow down. She'd left the city with her boxes and her pride bleeding quietly. Now she was back in a town that remembered her as May's girl, the one who used to read on the pier for hours. And she was married to a billionaire who fixed her sink. Lila didn't know what to do with any of it. One afternoon, a week into the marriage, Ethan knocked on her door with a small envelope. Lila opened it cautiously. "What now?" Ethan held out the envelope. "Key." Lila frowned. "Key to what?" Ethan's gaze stayed calm. "The Lighthouse Inn." Lila's stomach clenched. "I haven't even seen it up close." "I know," Ethan said. "But it's ours to protect. I thought you should have access." The word made her chest tight again. She took the envelope slowly, fingers brushing his for half a second. It shouldn't have mattered. It did. Ethan stepped back. "I'm going to the inn tomorrow morning." Checking the roof. Storm season did a number. Lila's first instinct was to say, "I don't need to go." Her second instinct, the tired one, made her ask, "Can I come?" Ethan's eyes lifted to hers. Pause. Then simple, "Yeah." The lighthouse inn sat at the far edge of town like it was holding its breath. Weathered wood, salt-stained windows, a porch that sagged slightly, and behind it the lighthouse itself, tall, pale, watching the water like a quiet guardian. Lila stood at the gate the next morning, wind biting her cheeks, and felt something in her chest shift. May had loved this place. Not because it was pretty, it wasn't, not right now. But because it was stubborn. It had survived. Ethan unlocked the gate and held it open for her. Lila stepped through, the grass crunching under her boots. Inside, the inn smelled like old wood and sea air and time. Dust motes floated in the pale winter light. A grand staircase rose in the entryway, the banister carved with little swirls like someone had once cared enough to make beauty out of structure. Lila ran her fingers lightly over the banister and felt something almost like grief. "It's bigger than I remembered," she murmured. Ethan's voice was quiet behind her. "May brought you here?" "When I was little," Lila said. "She'd tell me stories about couples who danced in the ballroom. Families who stayed for summers. People who found each other here." Ethan didn't respond with a joke. He just let her speak. Lila turned to him. "Why did you buy into this trust, Ethan?" Ethan looked past her, out toward the ocean, like the answer lived out there. "My mother stayed here once," he said finally. Lila blinked. "Your mother?" Ethan nodded. "Before she died. She wanted quiet. She wanted water. May knew her. Took care of her." Lila's throat tightened. May never said. Ethan's mouth pressed into a line. May didn't like saying the soft things out loud. Lila swallowed. "Neither do you." Ethan glanced at her, then away. "I'm trying." It was the closest thing to a confession he'd given her so far. They spent the morning walking through rooms, Ethan checking beams and windows, Lila touching walls like she was learning the place's heartbeat. They didn't talk much. The quiet between them wasn't awkward. It was shared. At one point, the wind gusted hard through a cracked window, and Lila flinched, instinctively bracing. Ethan's hand moved without thinking, resting gently on her shoulder, steadying her. Not gripping. Just anchoring. Lila froze. Ethan's hand stayed there for a second, then he pulled it back like he'd realized and didn't want to push. "Sorry," he said quiet. Lila swallowed. "It's fine." But her chest was tight because it hadn't been fine. It had been something else. Something that made her feel safe before she was ready to trust it. That afternoon, they sat on the inn's porch steps with paper cups of coffee, the ocean stretching out in front of them. Lila stared at the water. "So what's the plan?" Ethan glanced at her. "For the inn?" "For everything," Lila admitted. Ethan's gaze drifted back to the water. "Short term, keep it from falling apart. Long term, decide what it becomes." Lila's throat tightened. "What if I don't want to stay here?" Ethan's jaw flexed slightly, but his voice stayed calm. "Then we restructure. You sell your share. You leave." Lila blinked at him. "You just let me go." Ethan looked at her, steady. "I'm not going to keep you somewhere you don't want to be." The words should have comforted her. Instead, they scared her because they touched the exact place her Juan lived. Asterisk, people leave. People let go. People don't stay. Asterisk. Lila looked away, blinking hard. Ethan didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't demand she explain. He just sat beside her, the warmth of his shoulder close enough to notice, not close enough to trap. For the first time in a long time, Lila let herself breathe next to someone without performing. That night, back at May's cottage, Lila found a box in the closet with May's handwriting on a label. "Lila, for when you're ready." Her heart pounded as she lifted the lid. Inside were letters. Not many. Just a few tied with twine. She untied them with shaking fingers. The first letter was dated a year before May's death. "Sweetheart," it began, and Lila's eyes filled instantly. "If you're reading this, it means you came back. I hoped you would. Not because you failed. Because you were tired. And tired people deserve somewhere safe to rest. Asterisk, asterisk." Lila pressed the paper to her chest, breathing through the sting. May's letter went on, talking about the trust, about the inn, about Ethan. "He's a quiet one. He carries something heavy and he doesn't like asking for help. But he shows up. And showing up matters. Asterisk, asterisk." Lila's throat tightened. May's last lines made her chest ache. "You have spent your whole life earning love like it's a paycheck. I'm asking you to stop. Let someone stay. Let a place hold you. Asterisk, asterisk." Lila sat on the floor with the letter in her lap, tears sliding down her cheeks. Because she didn't know how to let someone stay. Not really. And now she was married to a man who looked like he knew how to stay better than anyone. The crack open scene came on a night when the power went out. A winter storm rolled in without drama, just heavy wind, hard rain, and the kind of cold that made the walls creak. May's cottage went dark with a soft click, leaving Lila standing in the kitchen with a candle half lit and her heart suddenly too loud. She hated the dark. Not because it was scary. Because it was lonely. She found flashlights in May's drawer, lit candles, tried to laugh at herself. But her body wouldn't unclench. Her mind ran the same track it always did in the quiet. Asterisk, you messed up. You're behind. You're not enough. You'll lose this too. Asterisk. A knock sounded at the door. Lila froze. Then she realized, Ethan. Of course. She opened the door to find him in a rain jacket, hair damp, holding a lantern and a small bag. He looked at her face and his eyes narrowed slightly. You okay? Lila tried to smile. Fine. Ethan didn't move. No. Lila swallowed, annoyed at being seen. It's just the power. Ethan stepped inside without pushing past her, setting the lantern on the table. The warm light filled the kitchen. I brought soup, he said, lifting the bag like it was an offering. Nora sent it. She said you'd pretend you didn't need it. Lila's laugh came out shaky. She knows me too well. Ethan watched her for a beat. Then, quiet. Do you want company? Lila's chest tightened. Her instinct screamed no. But her loneliness whispered please. She looked at him, candlelight flickering across his face, and something in her broke open just enough to let honesty through. I hate nights like this, she admitted, voice small. Ethan's gaze softened. Because of the dark? Lila swallowed. Because of my head. It gets loud. Ethan nodded like he understood more than she'd said. He didn't ask for details. He didn't say, you'll be fine. He just pulled out 2 bowls like he belonged in this kitchen now and started pouring soup with steady hands. They ate at the table in quiet, the storm pressing against the windows like a question. After a while, Lila's throat tightened again, the words rising whether she wanted them to or not. I got fired, she said suddenly. Ethan looked up, calm. I know. Lila blinked. How? Ethan's eyes held hers. Small town. Internet. May worried about you. Lila's chest tightened with shame. It was a mess. People thought I was corrupt. Like I stole money. Like I. Her voice cracked. She hated that it still hurt. Ethan set his spoon down quietly. Did you? Lila's eyes flashed, tears hot. No. Ethan nodded once. Okay. Just okay. Not suspicion. Not pity. Just belief. Lila's breath hitched. My boyfriend left right after. He said he couldn't handle the stress. Like my life collapsing was inconvenient. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. His voice stayed low. That's not love. Lila's throat burned. I keep thinking, maybe he was right. Maybe I'm too much. Maybe I ruin things. She stared down at her bowl like it held the answer. The kitchen was quiet except for the storm. Then Ethan's chair scraped softly as he stood. Lila's stomach dropped, that old fear rising fast. Asterisk, he's leaving. He's uncomfortable. He's done. Asterisk. But Ethan didn't go toward the door. He came around the table and sat beside her, close enough that his shoulder brushed hers lightly. He didn't touch her right away. He just sat. His presence was heavy in the best way, like a blanket. Like a wall against the wind. Lila's eyes filled. Ethan's voice was quiet. You didn't ruin anything. Lila shook her head, tears falling. You don't know me. Ethan's hand moved slowly, giving her time to flinch away if she wanted. He placed his palm over her trembling fingers on the table. Warm. Steady. Not demanding. I know what it looks like when someone's blaming themselves for other people's choices, he said. Lila's breath caught. How? Ethan's gaze stayed forward, not forcing her to look at him. Because I've done it. Silence fell again, thick with the weight of what he didn't say. Lila swallowed hard. What happened? Ethan's jaw flexed. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, simple and quiet, I lost someone. And I keep thinking if I'd been better, it wouldn't have happened. Lila's chest tightened. Ethan. He didn't elaborate. He didn't give a dramatic story. He just held her hand and stayed. And Lila realized with a soft shock that this was the thing she'd needed more than explanations. Presence. Someone not running from her pain. Her voice broke. I'm scared I'll never feel normal again. Ethan turned his head slightly, looking at her now. His eyes were steady and warm. You don't have to carry this alone, he said. Lila's breath hitched at the line, because it landed exactly where it was supposed to. She let her forehead drop toward the table, tears slipping down. Ethan didn't rush her. He didn't fix her. He just stayed, his hand over hers, the lantern light steady against the storm. After a while, Lila whispered, barely audible, Why are you being so kind to me? Ethan's voice was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. Because I know what it feels like, he said, to need a place to breathe. Lila turned her head slowly, looking at him through tears. And for the first time she saw it, the loneliness under his steadiness. the careful way he held himself. The restraint that wasn't coldness but caution. He wasn't saving her. He was sitting beside her because he knew the dark too. Lila's fingers curled slightly under his hand. Ethan's thumb brushed once over her knuckles, one small, grounding stroke. Then he said, voice low, I'm not going anywhere. Lila's chest cracked open on a sob. Because no one had said that to her like they meant it in a long time. And if you're reading this and you love slow burn romances where the safest thing is someone simply staying, tell me in the comments, would you let someone sit with you in the dark? The conflict didn't come as a fight or a dramatic storm. It came as a quiet misunderstanding, the kind that grew from old wounds trying to protect themselves. A week after the power outage, Lila walked into Nora's cafe and heard her own name in a low whisper. Married to Ethan Cole? Did you hear he's buying the inn for a community project? Some PR thing maybe? Lila froze, coffee orders stuck in her throat. Her skin went cold. PR thing. She turned and saw Ethan at the back table talking to a man in a suit, out of place in Seabrook Cove, too polished, too city. The man had papers spread out, pointing, smiling. Ethan looked calm, listening. Lila's stomach twisted. This was what she'd feared without naming it. That she was part of a plan she didn't understand. That her marriage, her paper marriage, was a tool. Lila backed out of the cafe before anyone could see her face. She walked fast, cold air stinging, her mind racing. Ethan was wealthy enough to have lawyers show up in suits. Ethan was wealthy enough to turn the inn into whatever he wanted. Ethan was wealthy enough to make her feel safe, and then leave her behind like everyone else. By the time she reached May's cottage, her hands were shaking. Ethan knocked an hour later. Lila opened the door with her arms crossed, trying to look calm. Ethan's eyes scanned her face. What's wrong? Who was that? Lila asked, too sharp. Ethan blinked. Who? The man in the suit, she snapped. At Nora's. Ethan's gaze sharpened slightly, like he understood. My attorney. Lila's stomach clenched. Your attorney? Ethan nodded once. Yes. Lila's voice shook. So this is a business deal. Ethan's brows drew together. No. Lila laughed, bitter. Then why do you need an attorney in a cafe? Ethan stepped closer, calm. Because the trust is complicated. Because the inn needs permits. Because I'm trying to keep it from being challenged. Or because you're using me, Lila blurted, the words cutting out before she could stop them. Ethan went still. The air between them tightened. His voice stayed low, but something in it hardened. I'm not using you. How do I know? Lila's throat burned. You didn't even tell me who you were. You let me think you were just a guy down the road. Ethan's jaw flexed. I am a guy down the road. Lila shook her head, tears stinging. No. You're a billionaire. And you're married to me on paper. And the whole town is watching. And I can't do this if I'm just another asset. Ethan stared at her a beat longer than usual, something raw flickering behind his restraint. Then he said quietly, Is that what you think I see you as? Lila swallowed, silent. Ethan stepped closer, stopping just far enough away to give her space. I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to change how you looked at me. Lila's laugh was shaky. It changes everything. Ethan's voice dropped. It doesn't change how I show up. Lila blinked. Ethan's gaze held hers. I fixed your porch. I brought you groceries. I sat with you in the dark. Was any of that fake? Lila's breath hitched. Ethan's jaw tightened. I met with my attorney because the trust needs to be protected. Because May's clause will be challenged if we don't build a plan. Because if I don't do it right, you lose what May left you. Lila's chest tightened. Ethan's voice softened, but it stayed steady. You're not an asset, Lila. He paused, then said something that sounded like it cost him. You're the only place I can breathe some days too. Lila froze. The line landed like a hand on her heart. Ethan didn't reach for her. He didn't close the gap. He just stood there, letting her have the truth without demanding a response. Lila's voice broke. Then why does it feel like you're always 5 steps ahead of me? Ethan swallowed. His gaze dropped for half a second, then lifted. Because I'm used to planning. Because if I stop planning, I start thinking about what I lost. Lila's chest tightened. Ethan. He exhaled slowly. My wife died. The words were simple, quiet. No drama. No performance. Lila's breath caught. Ethan's gaze stayed on the floor like he couldn't bear to watch her reaction. I promised her we'd stop someday. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere near the water. She picked Seabrook Cove off a map. Lila's eyes filled. Ethan's voice stayed low. After she died, I came anyway. Because I didn't know what else to do with the promise. Lila pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling. Ethan's jaw flexed. May knew her. May didn't let me rot. Silence filled the cottage doorway, heavy with the truth he'd finally opened. Ethan looked up at Lila, eyes steady, voice quiet. He must decide whether to open his past, Lila thought dimly, remembering May's words, and realized this was it. This was his choice moment. This was him stepping into vulnerability even though it hurt. Ethan said simply, I didn't marry you for a plan. I married you because May asked, and because you needed time, and because I didn't hate the idea of being tied to someone again as long as it was honest. Lila's chest broke open. Her choice moment came like a wave. She could run. She could restructure the trust, sell her share, leave the town, leave Ethan, leave the softness that scared her. Or she could stop running. Lila's voice was barely a whisper. I'm scared. Ethan nodded once. Me too. Lila stepped forward, one small step, and reached for his hand. Ethan didn't move at first, like he was afraid to hope. Then his fingers curled around hers, warm and steady. Lila swallowed hard. If you stay. Ethan's gaze held hers. His voice was quiet, sure. If you stay, I stay. The words settled between them like a vow they hadn't meant to make yet. Lila's breath shook. Then, slowly, she leaned in and pressed her lips to his. It wasn't hungry. It wasn't dramatic. It was soft. Almost surprised. A kiss that felt like relief and choice and the quiet courage of not running. Ethan's hand rose gently to the side of her face, thumb brushing her cheek once, like he was confirming she was real. When they parted, Lila rested her forehead against his for a second, breathing. Ethan didn't say anything else. He just stayed. Spring didn't arrive all at once in Seabrook Cove. It came in small proofs, the first crocus pushing through cold soil, the smell of thawed earth, the way the ocean wind softened. Lila and Ethan didn't become a fairy tale overnight. They became a routine. They worked on the inn together, Ethan handling permits and repairs, Lila handling community meetings, listening to locals talk about what they wanted the inn to be. An art space. A small library extension. A place for weddings again someday. A place that held people instead of being sold off. Lila started volunteering at the school, reading to kids the way May used to read to her. She started laughing in Nora's cafe without feeling like she had to earn the laughter. And Ethan quietly began letting people in. Not everyone, but Lila. He told her small stories about his wife, how she loved strawberry jam, how she used to leave sticky notes on his coffee mug, how she'd wanted him to stop chasing success like it could protect him from grief. Lila listened, not jealous, not threatened, just honored that he trusted her with the tenderness of someone he'd loved. One evening in late spring, they stood in the lighthouse inn's entryway, dusty sunlight spilling across the staircase, and Lila looked at Ethan and realized something that startled her. Home wasn't a place. Home was a person who stayed. Lila swallowed, heart full. Do you ever think May knew? Ethan glanced at her. Knew what? That we'd choose this for real. Ethan's mouth twitched faintly. May knew everything. Lila laughed softly, then grew quiet. So what happens when the 90 days are up? Ethan looked at her, steady, voice low. What do you want to happen? Lila's chest tightened, old fear rising, then softening under the weight of his steadiness. She took his hand. I want to stay, she said, voice shaking. Not because I'm trapped. Because I'm choosing it. Ethan's gaze warmed. Yeah. Lila nodded. And I want us. Real. Not paper. Ethan exhaled slowly, like something unclenched inside him. He lifted her hand and pressed a simple kiss to her knuckles, gentle, reverent. Okay, he said. Lila blinked, laughing through tears. That's all you've got? Okay. Ethan's eyes softened. Okay means I'm in. It means I'm not going anywhere. Lila stepped closer, resting her forehead against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of him. Outside, Seabrook Cove moved around them, waves, wind, footsteps, laughter from Nora's cafe down the road. The community didn't fade away as they chose each other. It held them. On a Saturday in early summer, the town gathered at the lighthouse inn for a reopening fundraiser. Doors propped open, lemonade on tables, kids running through the grass. Marisol stood at the front steps, beaming like she'd personally rebuilt the place. Nora nudged Lila with her elbow. So, are we doing a real ceremony or what? Lila's cheeks heated. Nora. Nora grinned. Don't Nora me. We all signed the papers. We deserve closure. Lila rolled her eyes, but her heart was warm. Ethan stood beside her, hands in his pockets, calm as ever. Marisol cleared her throat loudly. We have one more thing. Lila's stomach flipped. Ethan glanced at her, quiet. You okay? Lila swallowed. No. Ethan nodded. Me neither. Marisol gestured them forward. Come on, you two. The town's attention turned like a gentle wave. Lila stepped onto the porch, Ethan beside her. Marisol held up a small piece of paper. This isn't legal, she announced, smiling, because the legal part already happened at my desk. This is heart. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Lila's eyes stung. Marisol continued, May wanted that and protected. Ethan wanted to honor a promise. Lila wanted a place to breathe. Looks like Seabrook Cove got all three. Lila laughed through tears. Ethan's hand found the small of her back, steadying her. Marisol leaned in. Say what you want to say. Keep it simple. That's your style. Lila turned to Ethan, heart pounding. His eyes held hers, steady, warm, restrained in the way that always made her feel safe. Lila whispered, I choose you. Ethan's throat worked. His voice was low, simple, and sure. I choose you too. No speeches. No show. Just truth. Lila leaned in and kissed him softly, the crowd cheering like the whole town had been waiting for her to stop running. Afterward, as the fundraiser buzzed and kids ran and Nora cried dramatically into a napkin, Ethan pulled Lila aside behind the porch railing where the wind was softer. He looked at her like she was something he didn't want to mishandle. You sure? He asked. Lila blinked. About you? Ethan nodded. Lila smiled, tears still on her lashes. Ethan, you feel like the only place I can breathe. Ethan's eyes softened and he let himself do something rare. He let his forehead rest against hers. Then breathe, he murmured. I'm here. Lila closed her eyes and did. And in the quiet between waves and laughter, the billionaire and his accidental wife became something simple and real. Two people choosing a life that stayed. If you love slow burn romances where the ending feels like a beginning, follow for more.